So I'm Brian Wilson, president of WerkMaster, and at WerkMaster we have developed a Scarab grinder polisher that's specifically designed to work on countertops as well as on stairs and small, difficult to get places. And in working with Caesarstone and with our diamond tooling manufacturer, we developed a system to be able to polish in place or repair in place Caesarstone countertops. And the unique aspect of the Scarab is that it has 5 heads. It has the ability to polish dry or wet, but in the Caesarstone application we'll be doing wet grinding and wet polishing. We developed a specific head for the machine. It's called a random orbital. It effectively helps in taking swirl marks off with the machine. It uses a Velcro backed resin. Goes on this easy. In them create a different polishing pattern than if we use a direct drive system, which the machine is capable of doing as well. So the advantage today is that this machine has a water feature that we've developed for it, and Bob is going to take some time to show us how we do a repair today using the Scarab with the new Caesarstone tooling that's been developed for it.
Assuming we had a scratch on a countertop like this, and we'll do one in a minute, a thing that you have to do is decide which one of the pads to use. So if it's a deep scratch, if you can feel it with your nail fairly easily, you're going to have to go down to a lower. You might have to go to 50 or 100. If you have something that you can barely feel or barely see, then you may start at 100 and work your way up through the pads. Progress through the pads, you're going to get wider and wider and wider. And so by the time you finish, by the time you get up to 1500, which is normally where we would go, you're going to be doing the whole thing. So Peter's put the dam on here, which holds the water, because we use a little more water at the low end of the numbers, and then we're going to use less water as we get to the farther one. But we're going to go right out to the edges of it. So at this point, we'll choose a pad. So if we, in this case, if we had the 100s, we're going to put the 100s on, and we would then activate with that. Dirt's a little bit high, so we'll adjust it and just poke right down, so you've got less than 1/8 of an inch showing, and that way it keeps the spray down to a minimum. So to put a little moisture, we've got a scratch right in here that we're going to work to. So we put some water on there, and again we just we start at a lower speed. In this particular machine, we're going to start at a 1, and as we go through the grits, we'll actually build up a little bit more speed. You don't need to put pressure on it. It's nicely balanced. Just let it work. So you're going to work that area gently. And just like maybe about a square foot. This is where the 2 hands come in. There goes spray, so it's not something to worry about too much. What I normally do in a case like that is I go clean that off, see if I can feel the scratch anymore, get a visual with the lights coming down on it to see if I can see it at all. And if I need to, I'll repeat and go through the next, try it with the same one until I get totally out of it. You want to get, with the lowest level, you want to completely remove the scratch. What you've created is a minuscule cavity in this area, so you're going to have to then ease it all the way out. So in this case, we'll change to the other pads. So now we start at 100, we'll go up to 200.
And it's very important to clean with the paper towel.
Yeah, clean all because you've accumulated some grit down there. So now we've got the 200 pads on, we go with the 200. Just a caution, when you first get those pads, they are resin rich on the surface. So you have to open them up. Lots of different ways of doing it. What we normally do is we find some really coarse thing like the back of a slab of granite. Someone mentioned cement block, whatever it takes. put them down and grind into that, open those up by getting the first level taken off, because you'd spend an awful lot of time in the first one doing nothing if you don't. So you've got to open those pads before you start. I'm going to get just a little wider each time. I'm going to take in a little more space, opening up by maybe 5 inches each time to work those areas to even everything out. Then we'll move on to the next level. Now we're going to go to the 400. Now what we've done in between them is we've wiped this all up. We've taken away any of the grit that was left from the previous. We don't want to have anything left there at a coarser grind, so we clean all that off and dry it off before we start again. We will also go just one step farther as we go up into the 400 grit. We're going to just go another 4 or 5 inches out. We're just going to keep spreading out as we go to make sure that you get a nice even blend out to the final product. When we finally get to the last one, we're going to do the whole thing, but we're just blending everything out to give this a proper thing. So get a little water on there. Ready to go. Okay, we're ready to run our 800. But before we start that, we're going to clean this whole area off, dry it off, and give a really good visual inspection, because we don't want to have to be going backwards. So Peter's going to get busy on that part of it. Put the machine down for a minute. Now, I just should mention that as we go up, we can also start to increase the speed. So we took a one notch up where we did the 400. Now we're going to continue to go up a notch. By the time we get to the end, we'll be at about twice the speed we started at. So we'll get this dried off. Now what you need again is that incidence of light, the light coming in from an angle so that or from somewhere that you can actually see every bit of that, and especially go back to the area we had the scratch, which was right there. See if you can see anything. And then you're going to look at the areas around it to see how it's blending in. Make sure you haven't created any scratches when you're going along. So if something has come loose and you've created that, you might have created your own. You want to visually take care of that. Another paper towel. And so what we want to do is take a check on that, and we can also take a look at this when we use the gloss meter, and we'll check the level where we are with the 400. And then we're going to go to an area we haven't touched, so maybe at the very side here, where we haven't touched it yet, and get a reading and compare what that is to see if we're headed in the right direction. So that's perfect. We're not quite the same, but we're getting closer to it. So we're working our way up into that. WerkMaster has come up with a water feature where it allows you to feed water in constantly, so you don't need the sponge. This will mount through this particular hole. It has a hose on it that will mount to a little bracket underneath. You can hook it up to a garden hose, and in our conversations we were looking for other alternatives that you might be able to do to attach. You can have it go to a sink. It can go to different things that will allow you to have that constant water feed, and then you can control the flow with the valve. One of the ideas that came up today was that you can also have a gap in your paper or your dam here to be able to run down into a bucket. So we'll play with that as we go along, a new development, and it's a great progress as far as development on that. Now, another thing, when you reach the stage at the higher level, we're not only looking at getting the polish right, we're looking at getting the texture right, the visual texture. In Caesarstone, if you look closely at it, you'll see that the granules you can see the shape of the granules, and you can see sort of the gaps in between. It's almost perfectly level, but not quite. The resins shrink back a little bit. We want to recreate that. And one of the ways of doing that is to take acetone, and when you reach the 400 or 800 level, is you get a cloth and you rub the whole thing down with acetone. What you're doing when you're polishing is you're actually getting the resins being smeared around and filling in those gaps. So you're going to get a higher gloss quicker. It looks great, only it's not what it's supposed to look like. So the acetone will take the excess, the peanut butter that you've spread around in between them, where you've melted down some of the resins and blocked in between. You're going to take that out and kind of refresh it to know what it's really going to look like, because that's what we want to end up with at the end. So we'll do that after the next level. So again, you're going to go another 5 inches wider. So I'm going to do a wider swath. recognize that this actually takes a little longer than we're demonstrating today, but with patience, you should be able to do it. For a minor scratch, we found that you can get that scratch out and back up to the normal level in about an hour. If you have a deeper scratch, it may take you 2 to 3 hours to do it, but with about 25 square feet of counter to do. So again, we go back to the configuration. We have a fairly small island here today, but you also have to consider that this might be a peninsula that could go back and off in another direction. You could have more than 25 square feet fairly easily. So it's just then a question of how you're going to work out the time to be expected is relative to it. If I was doing this as a peninsula and I had another piece over here, I would probably come up and go only as far as the seam. I have a divide there. Similarly, I probably have the area that's beside it in shadow because the cabinets are above it, etc. It doesn't have that incidence of light coming in from the side, which make it so everything is visible. So coming to that seam is perfectly adequate. So we'll dry this off, do our acetone wipe, and create that. So I'm really looking for the lack of texture, if I can put it that way, that's there, and by using the acetone we can pull that off. Now, one of the things you have to be careful of with acetone is when you're using it, you don't leave the can sitting on the countertop. Because if it has moisture from the acetone there and leave it sitting there, it will affect the resins. If you're doing it simply as a wash, like this, it evaporates very quickly. And so you don't have to worry about it. But if I left the cloth on there or I left the can on there, I can do some damage to this countertop, and that's what I want to avoid. So I'll do that quick wipe down wash and then be done with it. And I'll put this somewhere that's safe to put down, probably on a towel and out of the way. Now we're going to do the 800. This is the second last level typically. Occasionally when you have a very dark color, some people might want to move towards 3000. But typically you're going to 1500. So we'll put these pads on and we'll head off to do the next one. Now we're going to move on to the 1500, and as I said earlier, this is normally the level we go at. At the end of the 800, we're going to do the same thing as we did it the last time with the acetone wash. To save a little time, we'll skip at this particular time, but we will do it at the end of the 1500. So we're going to take the 800s off and we're going to put on the 1500s. Ready to go on this one? A little water. Now, as we go, we can raise the speed up too. And again, it's bigger than we did before. So another 5 inches at a minimum. And then we're going to do the whole thing. Once we've done the main part of it a few times, we're going to do the whole thing. Done 1500, now we're going to give it that acetone wash to take the excess resin off. But in summary, I think the most important thing to learn here is that you can now, despite the fact that the things we talked about over time, that you couldn't do a quartz countertop, you couldn't do something on the surface, we now can. Come up with a solution for that disaster that happens when you get a scratch in your shop or a scratch at your customer's home. It's now fixable. And it's not that bad a process. A couple of hours invested in it, you're away to the races and back like new.